Picture a sweltering afternoon in Atlanta's chaotic airport, where Darius Coleman, a sharp-dressed black software engineer, boards his first-class flight to Seattle. He sinks into his cushy seat, ready to unwind, when a shrill scream erupts. From the galley, he doesn't belong here. A furious flight attendant charges out, jabbing a finger at him as passengers gawk. Phones light up, capturing the chaos. 3 minutes later, she's hauled off, fired mid-flight, but hushed whispers hint at something sinister brewing. What trap has Darius walked into, and how will it chase him? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from today, and, if you stand for justice, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales like this. The first-class cabin of Flight 742 hummed at 30,000 feet above Alabama's patchwork fields, a faint rumble of engines cutting through the stillness as soft overhead lights cast a golden glow on the leather seats. Darius Coleman, 35, a software engineer with a knack for staying cool under pressure, sat near the window in row 3, his sharp gray suit still crisp despite the muggy Atlanta airport he'd left behind. His broad shoulders relaxed against the cushioned backrest as he adjusted his silk tie, its silver sheen catching the light, and took a slow sip of ice-cold water from a plastic cup, the cubes clinking softly. Outside, clouds drifted past in thick, cottony clumps. But inside, the air smelled of recycled calm, a mix of polished wood and faint cologne from the businessman 2 seats over. Darius exhaled, savoring the quiet after the chaos of boarding, his dark eyes scanning the cabin briefly before settling on the view beyond the glass. The peace didn't last. A shadow loomed over him, sharp and sudden, blocking the light from the aisle. He glanced up to see a flight attendant standing there, her wiry frame rigid, her pinched smile more a grimace than a greeting. Karen Voss, her name tag read, the letters glinting under the cabin's fluorescent bulbs. Her uniform clung to her, like a second skin, navy blue and starched, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it stretched her pale forehead. She clutched a clipboard, her knuckles white, and her voice sliced through the hum like a knife. "This seat's reserved for priority clients," she said, her tone dripping with suspicion, her green eyes narrowing as they raked over him. Darius raised an eyebrow, his pulse steady, and set the cup down on the tray table with a soft thud. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his boarding pass and handed it to her without a word, his fingers brushing the crisp paper as he did. Karen snatched it, her movements jerky, and scanned the details with a frown that deepened with every line. The ticket was clear. Darius Coleman, seat 3A, first class, confirmed. Her lips pursed, a thin line of disbelief, and she thrust it back at him, her nails clicking against the tray. "Must be a glitch," she muttered, her voice low but sharp enough to carry. "People like you don't just sit here." The words hung heavy, a quiet bomb in the cushioned silence. Darius tilted his head slightly, his expression calm, his voice even as steel. "It's not a glitch. It's my seat." Around him, passengers shifted, a woman in a red blazer 2 rows back glancing over her magazine, a bald man in a polo shirt, across the aisle squinting as if sizing him up. Karen scoffed, a short, bitter sound, and shook her head, her ponytail swaying like a metronome. "I'll fix this," she said, more to herself than to him, and spun on her heel, her shoes squeaking, against the carpet as she marched toward the galley. The cabin buzzed faintly now, a ripple of curiosity spreading. The woman in red lowered her magazine, her brows knitting, while the bald man leaned toward his wife, whispering something that made her frown. Darius leaned back, crossing one leg, over the other, his polished shoe gleaming faintly. He wasn't rattled, not yet. He'd faced worse than a sour flight attendant with a chip on her shoulder. His mind flicked to the code he'd debugged last week, lines of logic untangling under his fingers, and he almost smiled. This was just another puzzle, one he'd solve without breaking a sweat. Minutes ticked by, the plane jolting slightly, as turbulence rattled the overhead bins, a tray clattering somewhere in coach. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, the rhythm steady, waiting. Karen returned, her strides quick and clipped, her clipboard gone but her attitude sharper than ever. She stopped beside him again, her shadow falling long across his lap, and planted her hands on her hips. "I've got security coming," she said, her voice tight, her eyes glinting with something close to triumph. "We don't have time for this nonsense." Before Darius could respond, she grabbed the intercom handset from the wall, her fingers jabbing the buttons. "This is Voss in first class. I need security at row 3 now. Possible unauthorized passenger." Her words crackled through the cabin, loud and deliberate, and heads turned fast. The woman in red gasped, her magazine dropping to her lap, while the bald man muttered, "What's going on?" to no one in particular. Darius kept his cool, his hands resting on his thighs, his gaze locked on Karen. "You're making a mistake," he said, low and firm, but she ignored him, her smirk growing as she hung up the handset with a click. 2 security officers appeared minutes later, their boots heavy on the carpet, their navy uniforms stark against the soft beige of the cabin walls. The taller one, a broad-shouldered guy with a buzz cut, nodded at Karen, while the shorter one, wiry with a mustache, eyed Darius like he was a suspect in a lineup. "Sir, we need your ID," the tall one said, his voice gruff but professional. Darius reached for his wallet, sliding out his driver's license with the same calm he'd shown all along, and handed it over. The shorter officer took it, glancing between the photo and Darius's face, then pulled out a handheld scanner. Karen stood back, arms crossed, her foot tapping a nervous rhythm. The scanner beeped, and the tall officer frowned, checking it again. "Ticket matches the manifest," he said, his tone flat, handing the ID back. "He's clear." The air shifted. Passengers murmured louder now, a mix of confusion and annoyance. The woman in red shook her head, muttering, "Ridiculous," while the bald man's wife whispered, "She's out of line." Karen's smirk vanished, her face flushing pink as the officers turned to her. "You called us for this?" the short one asked, his mustache twitching. She stammered, The system must have..." But the tall one cut her off. "Next time, check before you waste our time." They trudged back to their posts, leaving Karen standing there, her fists clenched, her breath shallow. Darius met her gaze unflinching and said, "Told you." She glared, her eyes burning holes into him, then spun away, disappearing into the galley once more. The cabin settled, but the tension lingered like static. The woman in red caught Darius's eye and gave a small, approving nod, while the bald man leaned back, still frowning. Darius picked up his water again, the ice half melted now, and took another sip, his mind ticking over what had just happened. He'd won this round, no question. He'd proven his place, shut down her nonsense with facts, and watched her slink off in defeat. It felt good, clean, like nailing a tricky algorithm on the first try. He adjusted his cufflinks, the silver glinting, and let his shoulders ease. The plane droned on, slicing through the night sky, and for a moment, he thought it was over. But it wasn't. As he set the cup down, a faint sound caught his ear, a hushed whisper from the galley, sharp and urgent. He tilted his head, straining to hear over the engines. Karen's voice, low but unmistakable, hissed through the partition. "We'll fix this," she said, her words laced with venom, a promise wrapped in spite. "Get his name to the ground. Crew. He won't get away with it." The colleague she was talking to murmured something back, too soft to catch, but the intent was clear. Darius's jaw tightened, just a fraction, his fingers pausing on the armrest. The victory he'd savored seconds ago soured fast. She wasn't done. This wasn't just a bruised ego lashing out. It was a plan, a threat, something bigger than a seat dispute. He glanced out the window again, the clouds now dark and jagged against the horizon, and felt the first real spike of unease ripple through him. The cabin lights flickered briefly as turbulence jolted the plane again, a tray rattling louder this time. Passengers grumbled, adjusting their seatbelts, but Darius barely noticed. His mind was racing now, piecing it together. Karen had power, or at least she thought she did, and she wasn't letting this go. He'd humiliated her in front of everyone, and she was plotting something ugly. What, he couldn't guess yet, but the chill creeping up his spine told him it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the plane steadied, he leaned back, eyes narrowing. Whatever she had coming, he'd be ready. The first-class cabin of Flight 742 dimmed as the night deepened, 30,000 feet above Alabama's sprawling wilderness, the engine's steady drone vibrating through the walls. Flickering overhead lights cast long shadows across the rows, bathing the leather seats in a muted amber glow. Darius Coleman sat in seat 3A, his gray suit now slightly wrinkled from the earlier tussle. The silver tie loosened just a touch around his neck. He stared out the window, the sky a bruise of indigo and black, clouds churning like a storm waiting to break. The air inside felt thicker now, tinged with the metallic bite of recycled oxygen and the faint whiff of spilled coffee lingering from earlier chaos. His tray table sat bare, the empty water cup long since cleared, and he flexed his fingers, feeling the stiffness from gripping the armrest during that first showdown. Turbulence jolted the plane, a sudden lurch that sent a tray clattering in. The galleon drew a few startled gasps from the back. Darius barely flinched, his focus inward, replaying Karen Voss's whispered threat from minutes ago. "We'll fix this." What did she mean? Was she just venting? Or was something nastier brewing? He couldn't shake the edge in her voice, the way it sliced through the hum like a blade. The cabin settled, passengers adjusting their blankets, but the quiet felt fragile, ready to snap. Footsteps approached, deliberate and heavy, echoing off the carpeted aisle. He turned his head just as Karen loomed into view again, this time flanked by a supervisor, a burly man named Greg with a buzzed head and a navy blazer stretched tight across his chest. His badge glinted under the lights, his face a mask of forced calm, but his eyes flicked over Darius with a flicker of unease. Karen stood a step behind, her wiry frame buzzing with barely contained fury, her pinched smile replaced by a scowl that deepened the lines around her mouth. She clutched a tablet, her nails tapping a restless beat against its edge. Greg cleared his throat, his voice gravelly but measured. "Mr. Coleman, we've got a situation. There's been a system error. Your seat's been reassigned to economy." Darius's pulse quickened, but his face stayed stone-cold steady. A system error? After security had already cleared him, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and opened the airline app, the digital ticket glowing on the screen. Seat 3A, first class, confirmed. He held it up, his voice smooth as glass. "No error here. This is my seat, same as it was 20 minutes ago." Greg squinted at the screen, his thick fingers brushing the tablet as he cross-checked it with his own data. Karen leaned in, her breath sharp and quick, and muttered, "That can't be right." The woman in the red blazer 2 rows back craned her neck, her eyes narrowing, while the bald man across the aisle shifted, his polo shirt rustling as he leaned forward. Greg's jaw tightened, his bluff crumbling, but before he could back off, Karen stepped closer, her voice rising just enough to sting. "We're overbooked up here. You need to move." Darius didn't budge, his legs crossed casually, his tone firm. "I'm not going anywhere. You've got the proof right there." Greg hesitated, caught between protocol and Karen's glare, then nodded stiffly. "Fine. Stay put for now." But Karen wasn't done. As Greg turned to leave, she tripped, her elbow knocking a steaming coffee pot from a nearby cart. The dark liquid arced through the air, splashing across Darius's lap, soaking his suit in a hot, bitter flood. He jolted upright, the scalding heat biting through the fabric, but he bit back a curse, his jaw clenched tight. Karen smirked, a quick flash of teeth, and chirped, "Oh my goodness, so sorry." The lie dripped from her words, thick and obvious. Passengers erupted, the woman in red gasping, "Are you serious?" While the bald man's wife yanked out her phone, the camera flashing to life. Darius grabbed a napkin, dabbing at the stain, his movements deliberate, his eyes locked on Karen. "Nice try," he said, low and cutting, the words a quiet challenge. The cabin buzzed louder now, a swarm of whispers and shifting bodies. "She did that on purpose," the woman in red snapped, loud enough for Greg to hear as he spun back around. Karen's smirk faltered, her hands balling into fists, and she pointed at Darius, her voice pitching up. "He's causing a scene. Look at him, disrupting everything." The bald man snorted, "You're the one throwing coffee, lady." And more phones came out, lenses glinting like tiny spotlights. Greg stepped between them, his bulk filling the aisle, and barked, "Enough! Back to your station, Voss!" She hesitated, her face flushing red, then stormed off, her heels stabbing the carpet with every step. Darius wiped the last of the coffee from his pants, the damp fabric clinging to his thighs, the bitter smell clinging to his skin. His heart pounded now, but he kept it buried, his posture steady as he sank back into the seat. The passengers settled, some still filming, others muttering their outrage. The woman in red caught his eye again, shaking her head in solidarity, while the bald man gave a gruff, "Good for you, man." Darius nodded faintly, his mind already racing. He'd won again, hadn't he? Forced her retreat, turned her stunt into a public flop. The stain on his suit was a small price for that. He flexed his hands, the napkin crumpled in his fist, and let himself breathe. Maybe she'd back off now, lick her wounds and leave him be. But then the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, cutting through the murmurs like a whip. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're experiencing some turbulence. Please remain seated and keep your belts fastened." The plane shuddered again, harder this time, the bins rattling overhead, a plastic cup rolling down the aisle. Darius glanced up, the words routine enough, but something in the tone felt off, a clipped edge that didn't match the weather outside. He brushed it off, leaning back, until a new sound pricked his ears. A faint hiss from the galley, muffled but sharp, like a radio spitting static. Karen's voice again, low and furious, leaking through the partition. "Get his name to the ground crew. I want them ready when we land." His stomach dropped, a cold jolt racing down his spine. Ready for what? Who was she talking to? He strained to hear more, but the engines drowned out the rest, leaving only that venomous snippet hanging in the air. The coffee stain suddenly felt heavier, a mark of something uglier than a petty jab. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was escalating, reaching beyond the plane, setting a trap he couldn't see yet. He scanned the cabin, the passengers oblivious, now, their phones tucked away, but the weight of her words pressed on him. What was waiting in Seattle? A complaint? Something worse? He gripped the armrest, his knuckles paling, and stared at the clouds outside, now jagged and dark as knives. This wasn't over. It was just starting. Hey folks, what do you think about Karen's dirty move with that coffee? Comment number 1 if you're raging at her audacity, or number 2 if you think Darius should have fought back harder right then. Drop a like if you're rooting for him to shut her down, and hit subscribe to catch how this explodes next. Was that spill just spite, or is it the tip of a nastier iceberg? Could she really pull strings on the ground, or is Darius one step ahead? Tell us below, what's she planning for him when those wheels touch down? The clock struck midnight as Flight 742 rolled to a stop at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, the jet bridge latching onto the fuselage with a dull thud. Outside, the tarmac glistened under a drizzle, reflecting the neon buzz of terminal signs and smears of red and green. Inside, the first-class cabin exhaled its last breath of recycled air, passengers unbuckling and stretching after the turbulent ride. Darius Coleman stood, his gray suit still damp from Karen Voss's coffee assault, the bitter scent clinging to him like a bad memory. He smoothed his tie, its silver sheen dulled by the ordeal, and grabbed his carry-on from the overhead bin, the black leather scuffed but intact. His broad shoulders squared as he moved toward the exit, his polished shoes clicking softly against the carpet, a quiet rhythm in the shuffle of tired travelers. The terminal swallowed him whole, a cavern of glass and steel buzzing with late-night stragglers. Baggage claim loomed ahead, its conveyor belts groaning under the weight of luggage, the air thick with the hum of fluorescent lights and the tang of jet fuel wafting through the doors. Darius adjusted his grip on the bag, his dark eyes scanning the crowd, alert but weary. The flight was over, Karen was gone, and that radio threat lingered like a ghost, but he pushed it down. He'd made it through her stunts, proven his place. Maybe she'd just been bluffing, her ego bruised too deep to let go. He exhaled, the tension easing from his chest, and stepped toward the escalator, ready to grab his suitcase and crash at his hotel. But trouble found him fast. 2 airport cops emerged from the shadows near the baggage claim, their boots scuffing the tiled floor. their navy uniforms stark under the harsh lights. The taller one, a lanky guy with a buzzed head and a badge reading Officer Tate, fixed Darius with a cold stare, while the shorter one, stocky with a patchy beard and a badge marked Officer Ruiz, rested a hand on his holster. "Darius Coleman?" Tate barked, his voice cutting through the terminal's drone. Darius stopped, his pulse kicking up, and nodded slowly. "That's me." Ruiz stepped closer, his boots squeaking, and jerked his chin. "We got an anonymous tip, said you were disruptive on the flight. Step over here." Darius's jaw tightened, his mind flashing to Karen's hissed words. Get his name to the ground crew. This was her move, her trap snapping shut. He kept his cool, his voice steady as he set his bag down. "I wasn't disruptive. Check the passenger footage. It's all over the internet by now." Tate smirked, a thin, crooked thing, and motioned to the side. "We'll get to that. First, we need to search your bag." The terminal buzzed around them, travelers glancing over with bleary curiosity, a few pausing to watch. Darius unzipped his carry-on, stepping back as Ruiz rummaged through it, tossing aside a laptop charger and a folded shirt with rough hands. Nothing. Tate's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't back off. "Follow us," he grunted, and they marched him toward a gray door marked Security Holding. The room was a concrete box, cold and sterile, with a metal table bolted to the floor and a flickering bulb overhead casting jagged shadows. Darius sat, his damp suit sticking to the chair as Tate leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and Ruiz paced, his boots thudding. "Anonymous tip said you threatened crew," Ruiz said, his tone flat but probing. Darius leaned forward, his hands clasped, his gaze unflinching. "That's a lie. I sat in my assigned seat, got coffee dumped on me, and stayed calm while your crew lost it. Call the airline. Check the manifest." Tate snorted, but Ruiz pulled out a radio, muttering into it. Minutes dragged, the silence heavy, broken, only by the static crackle of the response. "Tickets valid," the voice confirmed. "No incident report filed." The cops exchanged a look, Tate's face souring as the ground slipped out from under their story. Darius kept still, his breathing even, but inside, his mind raced. Karen had set this up, no question, but how deep did her pull go? Before they could regroup, a sharp knock rattled the door. A supervisor, a wiry woman with gray streaks in her hair and a badge reading Martinez, stepped in, her tablet glowing with a paused video. "You two need to see this," she said. Her voice clipped and hit play. The grainy footage showed Karen dumping coffee on Darius, her smirk clear as day, passengers gasping in the background. It was viral now, time-stamped from the flight's descent, shared by the bald man's wife. Martinez glared at the cops. "This the disruptive guy? Let him go. Now." Tate's shoulders slumped. Ruiz muttered something under his breath, and they waved Darius out, their apologies stiff and hollow. "Misunderstanding," Tate grumbled, avoiding his eyes. Darius grabbed his bag, his movements deliberate, and stepped back into the terminal, the neon lights washing over him again. Relief hit hard, a cool rush through his veins. He dodged. Her bullet turned her setup into a bust. The video had saved him, flipped the script, and left her flailing. He spotted Karen across the baggage claim, lurking near a pillar, her wiry frame tense, her blonde hair catching the light. She grinned, a quick, vicious flash, then slipped into the crowd. He shook it off, heading for the exit, the drizzle outside, misting his face as he hailed a cab. He sank into the back seat, the leather creaking, and let his head tip back, the city's wet blur streaking past the window. The driver, a grizzled guy with a Seahawks cap, glanced at him in the mirror. "Rough night?" Darius nodded faintly, the damp suit itching against his skin. "Something like that." He'd won, hadn't he? Outsmarted her again, walked away clean. The cab hummed along, tires hissing on the slick pavement, and he closed his eyes, ready to put it behind him. But then his phone buzzed, a sharp vibration, against his thigh. He fished it out, the screen glowing with a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay for humiliating her." His breath caught, a cold spike driving through his chest. The words glowed, stark and simple. No sender, no trace. He stared at them, the cab's heater buzzing faintly, the driver oblivious. Who sent this? Karen? Someone else? He glanced out. The window, the terminal shrinking in the distance, but her grin flashed in his mind. That fleeting, feral look she'd thrown him. This wasn't over. She'd lost the flight, lost her job, lost the cop's play. But this text was a promise, a claw reaching out from the shadows. What could she do from here? Harass him? Smear him? Worse? He locked the phone, his knuckles whitening, and leaned forward, his voice low. Step on it. The driver nodded, the cab surging through the rain, but the chill stayed with him, sharp and unrelenting. She was out there, and she was coming. The clock glowed 3 a.m. on the nightstand as Darius Coleman slumped onto the stiff mattress of his Seattle hotel room, the city's rain drumming a relentless beat against the streaked windows. The room smelled faintly of bleach and damp carpet, the walls a bland beige under the flicker of a cheap lamp. His gray suit, still blotched with coffee stains, hung over a chair, the silver tie crumpled beside it on the desk. He kicked off his polished shoes, the leather scuffed from the airport scuffle, and rubbed his temples, exhaustion tugging at his bones. The cab ride had been a blur, that text from an unknown number. You'll pay for humiliating her. Burning in his mind like a live wire, he'd locked the door, double-checked the deadbolt, and sank into the bed, his carry-on resting against the wall, its black leather glinting faintly in the dim light. Sleep should have come easy after the flight and the cop's ambush, but his phone buzzed again, a sharp jolt that snapped him upright. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, emails piling in like a digital storm. He frowned, swiping it open, and saw his company inbox breached. Dozens of messages spilling out to colleagues, clients, even his boss. Darius Coleman's unhinged, one read, the words jagged and bold. He's a liability, lost it on a plane today. Another, can't trust him with our projects, guy's a loose cannon. His stomach twisted, a cold sweat prickling his neck. He hadn't sent these. He clicked his sent folder, empty, then checked the headers, spoofed, bounced through a proxy, but the damage was screaming across his network. The room spun, the rain's steady tap turning into a roar in his ears. He grabbed his laptop from the carry-on, the charger cord tangling as he plugged it in, and logged into his work VPN. The emails were everywhere, timestamps matching the flight's landing, a coordinated blast painting him as a raving madman. His fingers flew, tracing the IP. It bounced through servers, but one hop linked back to a domain tied to the airline's internal system. Karen. It had to be. Her voice echoed from that radio hiss. Get his name to the ground crew. This was her payback, her claws sinking deeper than coffee stains or cop detentions. He dialed IT, his voice steady despite the chaos. My account's hacked. Lock it down now. Minutes later, IT confirmed the breach, reset his access and flagged the fakes, but the poison was out. His phone buzzed again, this time with Twitter alerts. Clips from the flight, chopped and twisted, flooded his feed. Him wiping coffee, voiceovers claiming he'd attacked Karen, her smirk edited out. Darius, the disruptor trended, thousands of likes piling on, strangers calling him a fraud, a thug. He clenched his fists, the mattress creaking under him, and scrolled through the mess. One video showed him arguing with the cops, audio dubbed to make him sound belligerent. Another had a fake interview, some guy claiming Darius had threatened passengers. All lies, all slick, all reeking of her spite. He called his HR rep, a no-nonsense woman named Sheila he'd met at last year's company retreat. Her voice crackled through, groggy but sharp. Darius, what the hell's going on? My inbox is a war zone. He laid it out. The flight, the coffee, the cops, the hack. His tone calm but edged with steel. It's fabricated, Sheila. Check the originals online. I've got proof. She sighed, the sound heavy with fatigue. Send me everything. I'll escalate it to legal in the morning. We'll fix this. He emailed her the raw passenger footage, the airline app screenshot, even the text from the unknown number, his, fingers steady on the keys. By 4 a.m., Sheila texted back, legal's on it. You're cleared internally. Take a week off, though. This is too messy. Relief hit, a thin lifeline in the storm. He dodged the bullet, kept his job, turned her smear into dust with facts. He leaned back against the headboard, the rain softening outside, and let his eyes drift shut. The trending hashtag faded as counterposts emerged, passengers from the flight calling out the edits. The woman in red tweeting, "He's the victim here, not her." The bald man's wife posted the full coffee clip, unedited, racking up views. Darius almost smiled, the weight lifting. He'd outsmarted her again, turned her own weapon against her. The hotel's heater hummed, a low comfort, and he figured he'd earned some rest. But then his phone chirped, a single piercing note that jolted him awake. He'd dozed off, the clock now reading 5:15. The room bathed in the gray pre-dawn glow filtering through the blinds. Another email, this one personal, from an address he didn't know. A string of random numbers and letters. He opened it, his pulse kicking up, and found a voice file attached. He hit play, the speaker crackling to life, and Karen's voice slithered out, sharp and venomous. "You're done, Coleman. You think you've won? This is just the warm-up." The file cut off, leaving silence thicker than the rain outside. His breath hitched, the room shrinking around him, the walls pressing in with her words. He sat up, the mattress groaning, and replayed it, her tone slicing deeper each time. How'd she get his personal email? Who was helping her? He checked the file's metadata, sent from a burner account, untraceable. But the intent was a neon sign. She wasn't stopping. The hacked emails, the fake videos, they were her opening salvo, not her endgame. He stood, pacing the cramped room, his bare feet sinking into the carpet, the damp suit staring at him from the chair like a ghost. His job was safe, sure, but this was personal now, a war she'd declared with no rules. What was next? His clients? His bank? His home? The rain picked up again, a hard lash against the glass, mirroring the storm in his head. He grabbed his phone, forwarding the file to Sheila with a quick note. "This is her. She's not done." He couldn't sleep now, not with that voice looping in his skull. He pulled on a hoodie from his bag, the fabric soft against his skin, and stood by the window, watching the city wake in smears of wet light. The text from the cab, the email hack, now this. They weren't random. She had reach, resources, maybe allies in the airline still loyal to her spite. He'd beaten her at 30,000 feet, outplayed her cops, and now salvaged his rep. But that voicemail was a promise of something uglier. He clenched his jaw, his reflection sharp in the glass, and felt a flicker of fire ignite beneath the fatigue. She wanted a fight? She'd get one. He'd faced worse than a bitter ex-flight attendant with a grudge. Years of boardroom snubs, coded insults, all met with the same quiet steel he'd shown on that plane. But this was different, rawer, a beast with teeth he couldn't yet see. The room's shadows stretched long and jagged, the lamp buzzing faintly, and he knew rest was off the table. Whatever she had planned, it was coming fast, and it had hit harder than anything before. He turned from the window, his mind racing, and braced for the next blow. The voicemail's echo, a taunt he couldn't shake. The Seattle night hung heavy at 4 a.m., a thick fog rolling off Puget Sound to cloak the streets in a damp gray shroud. Darius Coleman stepped out of his hotel, the glass doors whispering shut behind him, his breath puffing in the chill as he tugged his hoodie tighter. The city's hum was muted, just the occasional splash of tires on wet pavement and the distant wail of a siren cutting through the haze. His gray suit still sat crumpled upstairs, coffee-stained and abandoned, but he couldn't stay cooped up, not after Karen Voss's voicemail. "This is just the warm-up," looped in his head like a broken record. The alley beside the hotel stretched dark and narrow, brick walls slick with moisture, a single street lamp flickering at the far end. He needed air, space to think, his sneakers scuffing the concrete as he walked, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The fog swallowed sound, turning the world soft and surreal. But his senses stayed sharp, honed by years of navigating rooms where he was the only black face. He'd beaten her on the plane, outsmarted her cops, and salvaged his rep from her. Digital blitz, but that text, that voice, they were claws digging deeper each time. What was she cooking now? His mind churned, mapping possibilities, when a low growl pierced the mist. A pickup truck's engine, revving hard. Headlights flared, twin beams slicing through the fog, and the vehicle screeched around the corner, tires skidding on the slick asphalt. Darius froze, his pulse spiking as the truck barreled toward him, its rusted red frame glinting under the lamp. 3 figures leapt out before it fully stopped, doors banging open, their boots thudding against the ground. Masks hid their faces, black. Ski masks, eyes glinting through the slits, but their voices roared free, raw and vicious. "You think you're hot stuff, huh?" one bellowed, a bat swinging in his gloved hand, the wood scarred and splintered. "Get him!" another snarled, slurs spitting from his mouth like venom, the kind Darius had heard too many times growing up. The third lunged, a crowbar clutched tight, its metal edge catching the light. Darius's instincts kicked in, his body moving before his mind caught up. He ducked the first swing, the bat whistling past his ear, and yanked his briefcase from his side, slamming it into the crowbar guy's chest with a dull thump. The attacker staggered, grunting, but the Batman charged again, his weapon arcing down fast. Darius sidestepped, the blow cracking against the pavement, sparks flying as wood met stone. His heart hammered, adrenaline flooding his veins, but he kept his head clear, years of street smarts snapping into focus. He bolted, legs pumping, the alley's wet walls blurring past as he aimed for the street lamp's faint glow. The truck's engine roared behind him, tires squealing as it lurched forward, the third guy leaning out the window shouting, "Don't let him run!" Darius zigzagged, his sneakers slipping on the slick ground, and dove behind a dumpster, its rusted bulk shielding him as the bat crashed down again, denting the metal with a screech. Breath ragged, he peeked out, the fog swirling around his attackers' silhouettes. They fanned out, hunting him, their curses bouncing off the bricks. "Where'd he go?" the crowbar guy growled, kicking a trash can that clattered across the alley. Darius's hand brushed something sharp, a jagged piece of broken glass glinting in the muck. He gripped it, the edge biting his palm, and waited, his body coiled. The Batman loomed closer, his shadow stretching long, and Darius sprang, slashing the glass across the guy's arm. A howl ripped free, blood blooming dark through the sleeve, and the thug stumbled back, clutching the wound. "Son of a..." he spat, but Darius was already moving, sprinting past the truck as its headlights swung toward him. He hit the main street, the fog thinning under brighter lights, and flagged a passing cab, its yellow paint a beacon in the haze. The driver, a wiry kid with earbuds dangling, slammed the brakes, and Darius dove in, slamming the door. "Go now," he barked, his voice hoarse. The cab peeled out, tires spinning, as the truck's growl faded behind them. He slumped against the seat, chest heaving, the glass shard still clutched tight, blood trickling from his hand onto the leather. The driver glanced back, wide-eyed. "You okay, man?" Darius nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow, the sting in his palm grounding. Him, just drive. Back at the hotel, he cleaned the cut in the bathroom, the sink running red, his reflection grim in the cracked mirror. The ambush replayed in his head, those slurs, that bat, the truck's roar. He'd escaped, outsmarted them, but barely. Then he found it, a crumpled note wedged in his hoodie pocket slipped there during the chaos. Scrawled in jagged ink, "Karen sends regards." His gut clenched, a cold wave crashing over him. She'd gone from words to fists, from digital lies to real blood. He called the cops, his voice steady as he filed the report, pacing the room, the fog pressing against the window like a living thing. The officer on the line sounded bored, scribbling details. "Random attack, probably. We'll look into it." But it wasn't random. Hours later, a text pinged from the woman in red from the flight. She'd seen the truck parked near the airport, linked to an airline mechanic named Joey. Darius forwarded it to the cops, his fingers trembling slightly, and they grudgingly logged it. He'd survived, turned her goons into a dead end, and thought maybe he'd catch a break. The room's heater buzzed, a faint comfort, and he sank onto the bed, the note crumpled in his fist. He'd beaten them, hadn't he? Outrun her muscle, kept his skin intact. The city outside hummed, the fog lifting as dawn crept in, and he, let himself believe he'd won this round. Then the door rattled, a sharp metallic scrape, like someone testing the lock. He bolted upright, heart slamming against his ribs, and crept to the peephole. Nothing, just shadows. But when he opened the door, his room was trashed. Mattress slashed, clothes strewn, laptop gone. A message carved into the desk with a knife. "Next time you're dead." His breath stopped, the air turning ice cold. Karen's crew had hit again, silent and ruthless while he'd been on the phone. How'd they get in? Who was watching him? He grabbed his phone, dialing security. But the line buzzed dead. She wasn't playing anymore. This was war, and it was closing in fast. "Hey folks, what's your take on this brutal alley beatdown? Comment number 1 if you're cheering Darius for fighting back with that glass shard, or number 2 if you think he should have stayed inside after that voicemail. Smash that like button if you're stunned by Karen's escalation from coffee to crowbars, and subscribe to see how he dodges her next strike. Was this just a scare tactic, or is she building to something even deadlier? Could Darius have taken them down harder, or is he right to keep running? Drop your thoughts below. What's her crew got planned now that they've trashed his room? The gray dawn broke over Seattle, a watery light seeping through the blinds of Darius Coleman's trashed hotel room, casting jagged stripes across the slashed mattress and scattered clothes. The air smelled of stale coffee and the faint metallic tang of his dried blood from last night's alley fight. His hoodie crumpled on the floor beside the desk where, "Next time you're dead," was carved in ragged letters. His laptop was gone, stolen by Karen Voss's goons, but he'd salvaged. His phone, its screen glowing faintly as he paced the cramped space, his sneakers scuffing the carpet. The cut on his palm throbbed, bandaged with a hotel towel, and his broad shoulders tensed under the weight of the night's chaos. He'd survived her thugs, outrun their bats. But this latest strike, the break-in, felt like a noose tightening. He grabbed his carry-on, shoving what was left of his belongings inside, the black leather creaking as he zipped it shut. No point staying here, not with security's deadline and Karen's crew lurking. He checked out, the front desk clerk barely glancing up, and took a cab to the Seattle police station, the city waking in a drizzle that streaked the windows. The station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with flickering neon signs. The air, inside thick with burnt coffee and the murmur of radios. Darius sat across from a desk cluttered with files, facing Detective Holt, a gruff man with a salt and pepper beard and a rumpled suit that hung loose on his frame. His badge glinted under the fluorescent buzz, his eyes narrowing as Darius laid out the night. The truck, the masks, the note from Karen. Holt scribbled on a notepad, his pen scratching loud in the quiet, but his smirk grew with every word. "Random. Attack, huh? Sounds like you ticked off the wrong people." Darius leaned forward, his voice steady, hands clasped tight. "Not random. That note said, 'Karen sends regards. She's an ex-flight attendant from my flight, fired for harassing me. Check the airport footage. The mechanic's truck. It's connected.'" Holt grunted, flipping through a file, his fingers stained with ink. "We'll look into it. But you got proof beyond a scrap of paper?" Darius pulled out his phone, showing the woman in red's text about the mechanic, Joey, and the viral coffee clip. "Start there," he said, his tone cutting through Holt's apathy. The detective sighed, radioing for a patrol to check the alley, but his eyes flicked to a photo on his desk, a group shot with airline logos in the background. Darius caught it, a chill prickling his neck. Holt had ties to the airline, didn't he? Before he could press, Holt stood, his chair scraping back. "Files open. We'll call you." Darius nodded, grabbing his bag, and stepped into the drizzle outside, the station's hum fading behind him. He'd reported it, planted the seed. Maybe they'd dig up Joey, link it to Karen. His cab pulled up, the driver blasting talk radio, and he sank into the seat, the city's wet blur calming his nerves. He'd survived again, turned her physical, hid into a paper trail. But the calm shattered fast. 2 hours later, at a diner near his sister's place in Tacoma, his phone rang, Holt's gravelly voice crackling through. "Coleman, get back here. Now!" Darius ditched his half-eaten eggs, the diner's grease smell clinging to him, and cabbed it back, the rain heavier now, pounding the roof. Holt waited in an interrogation room, the concrete walls colder than the holding cell at the airport, a file fat with papers on the table. "You're in deep," Holt said, his smirk wider, his beard twitching. "Those guys from the alley? They're saying you attacked them. Got a witness too, a baggage handler named Pete. Says he saw you. Swing first." Darius's stomach dropped, a cold sweat beading on his brow. "That's a lie. They came at me with bats, slurs flying. I defended myself." Holt slid a photo across the table, grainy, showing Darius mid-sprint, the glass shard glinting in, his hand, the Batman clutching his arm. "Looks bad, Coleman. Self-defense or not, they've got a story and Pete's backing it." Darius clenched his fists, the bandage on his palm pulling tight. Karen's crew, flipping the script, pinning him for their ambush. Holt leaned back, his chair creaking. "You're under arrest for assault. Lawyer up." Cuffs snapped on, the metal biting his wrists, and he was shoved into a holding cell, the door clanging shut, the air stale with sweat and despair. His mind raced, piecing it together as he sat on the cell's hard bench, the concrete chilling his thighs. Karen wasn't just a loose cannon. She had a network, pulling strings from the airline to the streets to hear. Holt's photo, Pete's testimony. It was too neat, too fast. He called his lawyer, a sharp woman named Tanya he'd hired after the flight, her voice crackling through the cell's payphone. "Send me everything. Note, text, that mechanic tip," she said, her tone all business. He'd emailed her from the hotel, and she'd already dug in, pulling strings of her own. Hours later, she stormed into the station, a USB drive in hand, her heels clicking loud. "Got security cam footage from the alley," she told Holt, slamming it on his desk. "Shows your victim swinging first, Darius running. Pete's nowhere near it." Holt's smirk faded, his eyes darting to the screen as Tanya played the clip, grainy but clear, the truck's headlights flaring, the bat cracking pavement, Darius dodging. The baggage handler's lie collapsed, the thug's story unraveling. "Charges dropped," Holt muttered, uncuffing Darius, his voice sour. "But watch yourself." Darius rubbed his wrists, the metal's bite lingering, and walked out with Tanya, the drizzle cool on his face. Victory, clean and hard won. He'd beaten her frame up, turned her legal trap into dust with that footage. The station faded behind. Him? The city's wet hum washing over him, and he let himself breathe. She'd swung big and missed. But Holt's parting shot stopped him cold. As Darius reached the curb, the detective leaned out the door, rain streaking his rumpled suit, and smirked. "Check your mail, Coleman." Darius frowned, his pulse kicking up, and flagged a cab, the driver's radio now buzzing with static. Back at the hotel, he'd checked in again, new room, new lock. He found it, a thick envelope slipped under the door, no stamp, just his name in sharp ink. He tore it open, his hands steady, but his gut churning, and pulled out a legal summons. Karen Voss vs. Darius Coleman. Defamation, emotional distress, loss of livelihood, claiming he'd ruined her career with the viral video, seeking $250,000. His breath hitched, the paper trembling slightly in his grip. She'd lost her job, her goons, her cop play, and now this, a lawsuit, twisting his defense into her weapon. The room's heater buzzed, a faint mockery, as he sank onto the bed, the summons stark against the beige blanket. How'd she file so fast? Who was bankrolling her? He scanned the document, her signature a vicious scrawl, and saw the law firm's name tied to an airline contractor, a whisper of deeper pockets. This wasn't just revenge, it was a counterattack, sharper and colder than the alley's bats. He'd won the cell, walked free, but she'd flipped the board again, dragging him into a fight he couldn't dodge. The rain lashed harder outside, a storm brewing, and he knew she was out there grinning, her next move already in motion. The noon sun blazed over Dallas, Texas, its heat shimmering off the glass tower of the airline's headquarters, a sleek monolith piercing the cloudless sky. Darius Coleman stepped out of a cab, his gray suit swapped for a crisp navy blazer, and slacks, the coffee stains a distant memory, though the summons from Karen Voss weighed heavy in his briefcase. The lobby swallowed him, all marble floors and cool air, the faint hum of elevators blending with the click of his polished shoes. his broad shoulders squared as he rode to the 15th floor, the city shrinking below, his reflection sharp in the mirrored walls. The past week, flight, cops, thugs, lawsuit, had hardened him, his dark eyes steady with a fire he hadn't felt since cracking his first big code. The boardroom stretched wide, a long oak table flanked by leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Dallas skyline in a haze of heat. 3 execs waited, a wiry man with slicked-back hair named Paul, the airline's PR head, a stern woman in a gray suit, Ellen, from legal, and a balding guy in a pinstripe vest, Victor, the operations VP. Their faces were tight, practiced neutrality masking unease as Darius sat, his briefcase thudding softly on the table. Paul leaned forward, his voice smooth as oil. "Mr. Coleman, we've seen the footage, the headlines. It's a mess. We're here to settle this. Quietly." Ellen slid a folder across, her nails tapping the wood. $50,000 non-disclosure agreement. Sign, and the lawsuit from Ms. Voss. Goes away. Darius's jaw tightened, his hands resting on the folder without opening it. 50,000? A bribe to bury Karen's rampage? He'd watched her spiral from coffee spills to crowbars, and now they thought money could erase it. "No deal," he said, his tone flat but firm, pushing the folder back. "She's the problem, your problem. Fire her for good, admit what she did, and I'll consider dropping my countersuit." Victor's brow furrowed, his vest creaking as he shifted. "She's already terminated, Coleman. After the flight, she was out." Darius leaned in, his voice cutting sharper. "Then why's she suing me with your contractor's law firm? Why'd her goons hit me in Seattle? This isn't over until you own it." Paul's smile faltered, Ellen's nails stilled, and Victor coughed, a dry, nervous sound. The room's air thickened, the hum of the AC buzzing like a trapped fly. Ellen flipped open her tablet, scrolling fast. "We've investigated her actions. She acted alone, no airline support, but we'll prove it. Here." She pulled a letter from a drawer, the paper crisp, stamped with the airline's logo. Karen Voss, terminated effective March 20th, misconduct cited. Darius scanned it, the date matching the flight, the words cold and official. His pulse eased a fraction. Justice, finally. He'd forced their hand, turned her viral meltdown into their confession. "Keep it public," he said, sliding the letter back. "I want her name off your payroll, her lawsuit dead, and an apology online. Then we're square." Victor nodded, his bald scalp glinting under the lights. "Done. We'll post it today. Kill the suit. You've got our word." Paul stood, extending a hand, his slick hair catching the sun. "We're sorry, truly. This ends here." Darius shook it, firm but brief, the leather chair creaking as he rose. Victory tasted clean, a hard-won line in the sand. He'd beaten her again. Plain, cops, thugs, now this. The execs filed out, their whispers fading down the hall, and he grabbed his briefcase, the summons inside now a relic. The elevator hummed, back to the lobby, the marble cool under his feet, and he stepped into the Dallas heat, the sun baking his blazer. He'd won, hadn't he? The cab ride to the airport blurred past, strip malls and gas stations melting into the haze. His phone silent for once. No texts, no voicemails, just the soft ping of a flight update. He boarded a late plane back to Seattle, the first class. Seed a quiet echo of that first fight, the cushion sinking under him as he settled in. No Karen this time, just a young attendant with a shy smile, offering water he sipped slowly, the ice clinking faintly. The engines roared, lifting him north, and he let his eyes drift shut, the exhaustion catching up. The airline's apology would hit soon. Her lawsuit would collapse and he'd walk away whole. But peace didn't last. Hours later, back in his Seattle hotel, a new one, cleaner, with a view of the Sound, his phone buzzed as he unpacked, the screen flashing with a bank alert. He swiped it open, his breath catching fast. All 3 accounts, checking, savings, investment, frozen red warnings screaming, fraud investigation initiated. His balance read 0, $30,000 vanished, stocks locked. He dialed the bank, his voice tight, the line crackling with static. "What's going on? This is my money. The rep, a nasal guy named Tim, stammered. Sir, we got a tip. Suspected fraud tied to your name. Came from a corporate source, high level. We're required to freeze it pending review." Darius's chest tightened, a cold sweat slicking. His palms as he paced the room, the sound's dark waves glinting outside. "Corporate source? Who?" Tim hesitated, papers rustling. "Can't say, confidential. But it's flagged urgent. Could take weeks to clear." Darius hung up, his phone thudding onto the bed, and yanked his laptop from his bag, logging into the bank portal. Transactions locked, no access, just a blinking fraud notice. Then another buzz, a video call from a burner number. He answered, the screen flickering and Karen's face filled it, her blonde hair wild, her green eyes blazing. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice a razor through the speakers. "You'll never win, Coleman. I've got friends you can't touch." The call cut dead, her smirk lingering like a burn on the screen. His knees buckled, the room spinning as he sank onto the bed, the navy blazer creasing under him. Friends he couldn't touch? The airline execs had caved, shown her firing, promised peace. But this was bigger, deeper, a claw from the shadows. He called Tanya, his lawyer, her voice groggy but sharp at 8 p.m. "Bank's frozen my accounts, Karen's gloating on video, she's got someone inside." Tanya cursed softly, keys clacking. "Send me the call, the bank notice. I'll dig into it. Sounds like Victor or someone higher. We'll fight this." He emailed her, his fingers trembling, the room's silence deafening as the sound's waves crashed faintly outside. The summons felt quaint now, a paper cut next to this gut punch. He'd forced her firing, thought he'd buried her, but she'd flipped it. Again. How'd she pull this? Victor, with his nervous cough. Paul, with his slick lies. Someone else pulling strings from a corner office. His money, his lifeline, locked away by a tip she'd orchestrated. Her grin a promise of more. The hotel's heater kicked on, a low growl, but the chill stayed, sinking into his bones. He'd won the boardroom, walked out tall, but this was her checkmate, a blow he hadn't seen coming. He stood pacing to the window, the city's lights blurring in the glass. She'd lost her job, her lawsuit's teeth. But this was war on a new front, financial ruin with a corporate stamp. His mind raced, mapping the next move, but the scale of it loomed, a beast he couldn't yet name. The rain started again, a soft patter against the pane, and he clenched his fists. The bandage from the alley fight long gone, the scar a faint ache. She was out there, her friends with her, and they'd hit harder next time. He'd beaten her at every turn, but this was a wound that wouldn't close easy. A fight he'd have to claw through blind. The Seattle evening pulsed with rush-hour chaos, horns blaring through the gridlocked streets as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. Darius Coleman stood on a downtown corner, his navy blazer wrinkled from the flight back from Dallas, his briefcase swinging lightly in his grip. The city's damp air clung to him, a faint mist rising from the pavement, the hum of tires and chatter a stark contrast to the silence of his frozen bank accounts. Karen Voss's video taunt, "I've got friends you can't touch," echoed in his skull, her smirk a splinter he couldn't pull. He'd beaten her firing, dodged her lawsuit, but this financial gut punch had left him raw, scrambling to regroup. He pulled out his phone, the screen's glow cutting through the dusk, and tapped into Twitter, his fingers steady despite the storm inside. The airline's apology had posted hours ago, a crisp statement. Karen Voss terminated for misconduct. "We regret the incident and are addressing it fully." Likes piled up, comments cheering, the hashtag Justice for Darius trending fast. He exhaled, a thin thread of hope weaving through the mess. People saw it, his fight, her malice, and they were rallying. He tweeted from a burner account he'd set up after the hack, a simple call. "Truth's out. Stand with me against this. Justice for Darius." Replies flooded in, strangers and flight passengers alike amplifying his voice, the woman in red posting, "He's a hero, not a villain." By 6 p.m., a crowd gathered outside the airline's local office, a squat glass building 2 blocks over, its logo glinting under streetlights. Protesters, maybe 50 strong, Hoisted signs scrawled with "End bias now" and "Darius deserves better," their chants rolling through the streets like thunder. Darius joined them, his sneakers sinking into the damp sidewalk, his presence quiet but firm. A young guy with dreads handed him a megaphone, its metal cool in his palm, and he spoke, voice steady. "This isn't just about me, it's about what's right." Cheers erupted, phones flashing, the bald man from the flight nodding from the edge, his wife filming live. Victory loomed, a tidal wave of support he could ride. But the tide turned fast. A new tweet pinged his burner from a handle he recognized. "Sky High Truth," a guy named Mark who'd sat in first class, quiet until now. "Darius staged it all, here's proof." Attached was an audio file, 30 seconds long, crackling with static. Darius hit play, his heart sinking as his own voice seemed to spill out. "I set her up, got her fired, easy win." The crowd hushed, heads swiveling, phones lowering as the clip spread, retweets spiking like wildfire. His stomach twisted, a cold sweat slicking his neck. It was fake, stitched together, his words from the flight warped into a confession. He shouted into the megaphone, "That's not me, it's a lie." But the damage raced ahead, unstoppable. Protesters turned, their cheers souring to jeers. "Liar!" a woman in a green coat yelled, her sign dropping to the pavement with a wet slap. "Fraud!" a guy in a Seahawks cap spat, chucking a soda can that splashed sticky across Darius's blazer. He ducked, the megaphone slipping, his voice drowned by boos. The bald man frowned, his wife pausing the video, but the mob surged, a wall of rage he couldn't break. He bolted, legs pumping, weaving through traffic as horns blared, the crowd's shouts chasing him into an alley. His chest heaved, the mist thickening around him, the city's lights blurring as he leaned against a brick wall, the cold seeping through his clothes. He'd lost them, outrun the chaos, but the sting burned deep. How'd this happen? Who flipped Mark? He pulled, his phone, hands trembling, and saw the hashtag flip. Darius, the fraud trending now, thousands swallowing the lie. He called his hacker buddy Jamal, a wiry guy he'd met at a tech conference, his voice crackling through. "Jamal, that audio's fake. Trace it." Jamal's keys clacked, fast and furious. "On it, man. Gimme an hour." Darius waited, pacing the alley, the drizzle soaking his hair, his mind racing. Karen's friends again, twisting his win into a knife. He'd rallied the public, thought he'd turned the tide, only to watch it crash back in his face. Jamal called back, his tone sharp with triumph. "Got it. Audio's forged, spliced from your flight clips, run through an airline server. IP matches their Dallas hub." Darius's breath steadied, a spark igniting beneath the dread. Proof, hard and cold. He emailed it to Tanya, his lawyer, with a note. "They're at it again. Airline's dirty." She replied fast. "Filing an injunction tomorrow. This clears you." He tweeted from the burner, attaching Jamal's trace. "Fake audio, airline source. Truth still stands. Justice for Darius." Likes trickled in, the woman in red retweeting, "He's fighting back." The mob's roar faded online, doubters peeling off as the forgery spread. Relief hit, a fragile lifeline. He'd flipped it again, turned her betrayal into a bust. The alley's shadows stretched long, the drizzle easing as he stepped back onto the street. The city's hum softer now. He'd lost the crowd, sure, but the truth was clawing back, his name inching toward redemption. He wiped the soda from his blazer, the stickiness clinging to his fingers, and headed for his hotel, the sound's dark waves glinting in the distance. Karen's move had stung, deep in public, but he'd countered it, hadn't he? The fight wasn't over, but he'd held the line. Hey folks, what's your take on this wild street twist? Comment number 1 if you're pumped. Darius dodged that mob and proved the audio fake. Or number 2 if you think he should have stayed and faced them head on. Drop a like if you're shocked by Karen's sneaky public stab, and subscribe to catch how he battles her next blow. Was Mark just a pawn, or did he sell out for cash? Could Darius have rallied the crowd back, or was running his only play? Tell us below. What's Karen's crew cooking up now that the streets turned on him? The clock struck midnight in Tacoma, a quiet suburb south of Seattle, where the streets lay still under a blanket of drizzle. and the faint glow of porch lights pierced the dark. Darius Coleman pulled up to his sister Lena's house, a modest two-story with peeling white paint, its front yard dotted with soggy tulips. His navy blazer hung damp from the day's chaos, his briefcase left behind in the hotel, replaced by a duffel slung over his shoulder. The public betrayal, Mark's fake audio, the mob's jeers, still stung. But Jamal's trace had clawed back some ground, and he needed refuge. A breather from Karen Voss's relentless war. Lena's porch light flickered as he stepped out of the cab, his sneakers crunching gravel, the night's chill seeping through his hoodie. Lena greeted him at the door, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a late shift, her braids pulled back in a tight bun. At 32, she was shorter than him, her frame wiry but strong, her brown eyes softening as she hugged him tight. "You look like hell, Dee," she said, her voice warm but edged with worry, the living room behind her smelling of lavender and leftover pizza. He forced a smile, dropping the duffel by the couch, its plaid fabric sagging under a stack of medical journals. "Rough week, just need to crash." She nodded, locking the door, the deadbolt clicking loud in the quiet. He sank into the couch, the springs groaning, and let the familiar hum of her home, clock ticking, fridge buzzing, ease the knots in his chest. Sleep came fast, a heavy pull that dragged him under, the day's weight finally lifting. But peace shattered hours later with a deafening boom that shook the house, glass splintering somewhere outside. Darius jolted awake, heart slamming, the room pitch black save for the orange flicker dancing through the blinds. "Lena!" he yelled, scrambling up, his bare feet hitting the cold hardwood. She stumbled from her bedroom, eyes wide, a robe thrown over her scrubs. "What the hell was that?" she gasped, voice trembling. He yanked the blinds open and his gut dropped. Her car, a beat-up blue sedan parked in the driveway, roared with flames, fire licking the night sky, black smoke billowing thick and acrid. He grabbed her arm, pulling her back as she lunged for the door. "Stay here. Call 911, he barked, snatching his phone from the duffel, his fingers fumbling as he dialed 2. Sirens wailed in the distance within minutes. Red lights flashing through the drizzle as firefighters swarmed, hoses blasting the inferno into a steaming husk. Neighbors peeked from windows, shadows in pajamas, while Darius and Lena stood on the porch, the heat still pulsing against their skin. A cop, a stocky woman with a buzz cut named Officer Grant, approached, her notepad damp from the mist. "Anyone hurt?" she asked, voice clipped. Darius shook his head, his throat tight. "No, but that's arson. Look closer." Grant's flashlight swept the wreckage and she froze, picking up a singed paper wedged under the charred bumper. She held it out, her gloved hand steady. "Next time, it's her." The words scrawled in jagged ink hit Darius like a punch, his breath catching as Lena gasped beside him, her hand flying to her mouth. Karen's note from the alley flashed in his mind. Karen sends regards. And now this, her venom striking his family. He clenched his fists, the drizzle soaking his hoodie, and told Grant everything. The flight, the thugs, the lawsuit, the bank freeze. "It's her, Voss. She's behind it." Grant scribbled fast, her jaw tight. "We'll test. For accelerants, run prints. Got a lead?" Darius pulled up the mechanic tip from the woman in red, Joey's name tied to the airline, and handed it over. "Start with him." Grant nodded, radioing it in, and by dawn, the fire was out, the car a twisted skeleton under a tarp. Lab results pinged fast, gasoline traces, a match stub, deliberate. A patrol nabbed Joey near the airport, his truck reeking of fuel, a burner phone in his glove box with texts linking him to the hit. Darius posted it online from his burner. Justice for Darius surging again. "They torched my sister's car, airlines. Dirty. Truth's out." Likes flooded in, the bald man retweeting, "This is war now." Joey confessed under pressure, naming Karen as the shot caller, and cops hauled him off, cuffs snapping tight. Relief hit, a fragile shield. Lena was safe. The house intact, the perp caught. He'd turned her strike into a bust, exposed her game again. He hugged Lena on the porch, her trembling easing, the drizzle fading as the sun crept up, painting the tulips gold. "We're okay," he said, his voice steady, and she nodded, leaning into him. He'd protected her, flipped Karen's fire, into a jail cell for Joey. The neighborhood settled, curtains closing, and he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd bought some breathing room. But then the radio in Lena's kitchen crackled, a faint hiss cutting through the morning calm as they stepped inside. He'd left it on, low, a habit from late-night coding sessions, but now Karen's voice slithered out, sharp and unhinged, hijacking the signal. "Family's fair game, Coleman. You can't hide them all." The broadcast cut dead, static buzzing loud, and Lena froze, her mug slipping to crash on the tile, coffee pooling dark. Darius's blood ran cold, his knees buckling as he grabbed the counter, the room spinning. How'd she hack that? Who was feeding her now? He spun to Lena, her eyes wide with terror, and checked his phone. Her hospital's HR had emailed minutes ago. "Due to external pressure, your employment is terminated, effective immediately." His gut twisted, a double blow. Karen's. Fire hadn't just burned the car, it had torched Lena's life too. The airline's shadow loomed, Joey's arrest a pebble in a storm. She'd lost her thug, sure, but this was her real hit, striking his sister's safety, her job, with a reach he couldn't block. The kitchen's fluorescent buzzed, a harsh glare on the broken mug, and he knew she'd flipped it again, her voice a promise of deeper cuts. Lena sank into a chair, head in hands, and Darius stood over her, fists clenched, the fight now a war he couldn't shield her from. The morning sun glared through the tall windows of the federal courthouse in Seattle, its rays slicing across the polished wood of the courtroom, where rows of spectators buzzed with hushed anticipation. Darius Coleman sat at the plaintiff's table, his navy blazer crisp over a white shirt, his broad shoulders steady despite the chaos of the past weeks. His lawyer, Tanya, perched beside him, her sharp features set in focus, a stack of files and a laptop glowing with evidence before her. Across the aisle, the airline's defense team, 3 suits in pinstripes, shuffled papers, their faces tight, the weight of the Justice for Darius protest chanting outside pressing through the walls. The air smelled of old varnish and tension, the judge's gavel a distant echo as proceedings kicked off. Darius's hands rested on the table, his bandaged palm a faint ache from the alley fight, his mind replaying Karen Voss's latest blow, Lena's car torched, her job stolen, that hacked radio snarl, family's fair game. He'd sued the airline for harassment, a $5 million claim tying her attacks to their negligence, and now it was war, full tilt. Tanya opened, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "My clients endured assault, defamation, financial sabotage, all traced to airline affiliates. They enabled Voss and we've got proof." She clicked the laptop, projecting footage, the coffee spill, the alley ambush, Joey's arrest, IP traces from Jamal linking the smear audio to Dallas HQ. The jury leaned in, eyes narrowing, the bald man from the flight nodding from the back row. The defense countered, a slick attorney named Hayes standing tall, his tie a garish red slash. "Mr. Coleman's claims are exaggerated. Voss acted alone, terminated promptly. No airline liability here." He flashed a termination letter, Karen's, already public, but Tanya pounced, sliding the mechanic's confession into evidence. "Joey named Voss as his boss, paid through an airline contractor. Your prompt termination didn't stop her network." Hayes faltered, his smirk twitching, and the judge, a stern woman with gray curls, scribbled notes, her brow furrowing. Darius kept still, his pulse steady, the room's hum a backdrop to his quiet fire. He'd built this case brick by brick, and it was holding. Mid-trial, day 3, the air shifted. A bailiff slipped Tanya a note, her eyes widening as she whispered, "To Darius, cops found something." She called a recess and they huddled in a side room, the walls a dull green, the air stale with coffee breath. A detective, a lanky guy named Perry, joined them, his badge glinting. "Patrol caught a tip. Drugs in your car, parked at the hotel. They're searching now." Darius's stomach dropped, his breath catching. "I don't do drugs. It's a plant." Tanya's jaw tightened, her heels clicking as she paced. "Her crew again. We need to move fast." He nodded, his mind racing, Karen's allies, striking mid-fight, flipping his win into a trap. The search hit the news fast. Protesters, outside wavering, phones buzzing with Darius the fraud creeping back. Darius sat in the courtroom, cuffs looming in his mind as Tanya rushed to counter. She called Perry to the stand, his voice steady. Found a baggie, cocaine, planted under the driver's seat. No prints, too clean. Tanya clicked the laptop, again, pulling hotel security footage from Jamal's latest hack. 2 figures, hooded, slipping into the lot, one jamming something under his car. Timestamp, last night while he'd slept. This is sabotage, she snapped, glaring at Hayes. Your client's desperate to discredit him. The jury murmured, Hayes stammering, objection, speculation. But the judge overruled, her gavel a sharp crack. Darius exhaled, the cuffs fading as Perry stepped down. Tanya piled on. Bank records showing the freeze tied to Victor's email, Joey's texts, Karen's voicemail. The defense crumbled, Hayes' red tie wilting as he slumped. Day 5. The judge ruled, airline liable for negligence enabling harassment, $5 million awarded to Mr. Coleman. Cheers erupted outside, the bald man's wife tweeting live, justice served. Darius stood, his blazer creasing, relief flooding him like cool water. He'd won, big, turned her war into a courtroom rout. Tanya clapped his shoulder, her grin fierce. They're done, D. You nailed 'em. He nodded, the weight lifting. The gavel's echo a victory bell. He stepped out, the sun blinding, protesters roaring his name, signs waving high. 5 million. Karen's network exposed. He'd crushed her, hadn't he? The drizzle had cleared, the city sharp and bright, and he hailed a cab, the driver blasting hip-hop, the beat matching his pulse. Back at the hotel, he'd pack, move, Lena somewhere safe, rebuild. The cab dropped him off, the sound's waves glinting in the distance, and he walked to his car, keys jangling, ready to roll. But as he crossed the lot, a red dot danced on his chest, a laser's pinpoint flickering in the daylight. His heart stopped, eyes darting. A sniper, somewhere high. The dot vanishing as sirens wailed nearby, spooked off. He ducked behind his car, breath ragged, the pavement cold against his palms. Then a note fluttered down, slipped from a passing truck's window, landing wet beside him. This isn't over. His gut clenched, the ink smudged but sharp, Karen's venom bleeding through. The sirens faded, the lot empty again, but the chill stayed, a knife in his spine. He'd won the case, banked the cash, thought he'd buried her, but this was her answer, a bullet's promise dodged by luck. How'd they track him here? Who was pulling the trigger? He grabbed the note, his fingers trembling, the blazer soaking with sweat. The war wasn't done. It was roaring back, deadlier than ever. The midnight waves crashed against the rocky shore near Puget Sound, their roar echoing through the fog that blanketed an abandoned warehouse on Seattle's outskirts, its rusted walls sagging under years of neglect. Darius Coleman crouched behind, a stack of rotting crates, his navy blazer swapped for a black jacket, his breath shallow in the damp, salty air. His sneakers pressed into the gravel-strewn floor, the duffel slung over his shoulder heavy with his phone, a flashlight, and a penknife he'd grabbed after the sniper's laser danced on his chest hours ago. The note, "This isn't over," burned in his pocket, Karen Voss's venom driving him here, to her last stand. He'd tracked her through Jamal's hack, a burner signal pinging this spot, and now it was endgame. The warehouse loomed dark, its broken windows glinting faintly under a sliver of moon, the air thick with mildew and the tang of old oil. He'd won the lawsuit, 5 million in his pocket, thought he'd crushed her, but that red dot had flipped it. Her allies weren't done, and neither was she. His broad shoulders tensed, his bandaged palm itching as he crept forward, the gravel crunching soft underfoot. A voice cut through the stillness, sharp and unhinged, Karen's, echoing off the metal walls. "You're late, Coleman." He froze, spotting her near a rusted conveyor belt, her blonde hair wild, her wiry frame taut in a navy coat, a pistol glinting in her hand. Beside her stood Victor, the balding exec from Dallas, his pinstripe vest swapped for a dark sweater, his eyes glinting with cold fury. Darius's pulse spiked, his mind racing. Victor, operations VP, the one who'd coughed nervously in the boardroom, promising her firing. He wasn't just a bystander. He was her muscle, her bankroll. "Thought you'd slink away after the trial," Darius called, his voice steady, stepping into the open, the flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Karen smirked, her gun steady, her green eyes blazing. "You ruined me. Job, life, everything. Now you're done." Victor chuckled, a low gravelly sound pulling rope from a bag. "Stage suicide, Coleman. Neat and tidy. Cops'll buy it after your breakdown." Darius's gut twisted, the trap snapping clear. Kill him, frame him, bury the lawsuit's fallout. He edged back, his sneakers silent on the gravel, buying time. "You're cooked, both of you. Joey's in jail, the airline's bleeding. Why keep digging?" Karen's laugh cracked, high and brittle. "Because I hate you. You sat there all smug, thinking you belonged. This ends my way." Victor lunged, rope swinging, but Darius dodged, his jacket flapping as he rolled behind a steel drum, its rusted edge scraping his elbow. Karen fired, the shot ringing loud, the bullet ricocheting off the drum with a metallic clang. He ducked, low, heart hammering, and yanked the penknife from his duffel, its blade small but sharp, glinting in the moonlight streaming through a cracked skylight. The warehouse turned into a battlefield, shadows twisting as they hunted him. Victor charged again, his bulk slamming crates aside, wood splintering with a crash. Darius sprang up, slashing the knife across Victor's thigh, blood blooming dark through the sweater. The exec roared, stumbling, his rope dropping as he clutched the wound, his face twisting in pain. "Get him!" Karen shrieked, firing wild, a second shot punching a hole in the wall, plaster dust raining down. Darius dove, gravel biting his knees, and tackled her legs, her gun skittering across the floor with a clatter as she hit the ground hard, her coat tangling around her. She clawed at him, nails raking his cheek, her breath hot and furious. "You're nothing," she spat, but he pinned her wrists, his weight crushing her fight, the penknife pressed to her throat. Not cutting, just a threat. "It's over," he growled, his voice raw, blood trickling from his cheek mixing with the sweat on his jaw. Victor staggered up, limping, and swung a fist, but Darius rolled off Karen, kicking the exec's wounded leg. Victor crumpled, howling, his bulk thudding against the conveyor belt, knocking a rusted gear loose that clanged loud in the dark. Darius grabbed Karen's gun, its grip cold in his palm, and stood, chest heaving, the flashlight beam sweeping over them. Karen sprawled, Victor groaning, both beaten. He pulled his phone, dialing 911, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Warehouse off Puget Sound. 2 assailants down. Attempted murder. Send backup." The operator crackled. "Back, the unit's en route." And he zip-tied their wrists with cords from his duffel, his hands slick with sweat and blood. Cops swarmed in minutes, boots stomping gravel, flashlights slicing the fog, hauling Karen and Victor up, her screams echoing as they cuffed her, his grunts muffled by pain. Relief hit, a tidal wave crashing through him. He'd tracked her, faced her, flipped her trap into their doom. The warehouse's damp air cooled his skin as he stepped outside, the waves pounding steady, the moon sharper now. He'd won. Total victory. Her gun in evidence, Victor's blood on the floor, both locked away. The lead cop, a grizzled woman named Diaz, nodded at him, her badge glinting. "Good work, Coleman. We'll need your statement, but they're done." He wiped his cheek, the sting grounding him, and leaned against a crate, the fight draining out of him. Karen's war was over, wasn't it? But Victor's voice rasped as they dragged him past, his bald scalp slick with sweat, his eyes glinting with a final jab. "The system's bigger than me, Coleman. You think this ends it?" The words landed like a brick, his gut twisting as the cop car's lights flashed red and blue, the fog swallowing their taillights. Darius froze, the gravel cold under his sneakers, the duffel sagging at his side. Bigger than me? What system? The airline's execs? A deeper network? He'd beaten Karen, taken Victor down, thought he'd cut the head off her snake. But this was a fang sinking in late, a hiss of something vast and unseen. The waves roared louder, a rhythm matching his racing pulse, the fog curling thick around. Him. His phone buzzed. Jamal texting. Found encrypted files on Victor's server. Too big to crack yet. Darius's breath hitched, the night pressing in, the victory souring fast. He'd fought her every step, plane, cops, thugs, courts, now this, and won. But Victor's parting shot cracked the ground beneath him. Who else was out there? How far did it stretch? The warehouse loomed behind, a hulking shadow, and he gripped the penknife tighter, its blade still warm from the fight. Karen was gone, Victor too, but the war wasn't dead. It was shifting, and he was still in its jaws. The dawn broke soft over Seattle, a pale gold spilling across the skyline, glinting off the glass towers and the restless waves of Puget Sound. Darius Coleman stood in his new apartment, a sparse 10th-floor unit he'd rented with a chunk of the $5 million lawsuit win, the hardwood floors bare under his sneakers. His black jacket hung on a chair, stained with warehouse grit and Victor's blood. His duffel unpacked beside a couch still wrapped in plastic. The air smelled, of fresh paint and coffee brewing in the kitchen, a quiet hum after the chaos of Karen Voss's final stand. His broad shoulders relaxed, the penknife scar on his palm a faint throb as he sipped from a chipped mug, the city waking below in a murmur of traffic and gulls. The night before replayed in his mind. Karen's gun, Victor's rope, the warehouse, fight he'd turned into their arrest. Cops had hauled them off, her screams fading into the fog, his leg bleeding from the knife slash, both locked away. The airline's CEO resigned hours later, a breaking news alert pinging his phone. Executive steps down amid racism scandal linked to Victor Ellis's confession. Jamal's hack had cracked Victor's burner, spilling texts tying him to Joey, the mechanic, and a vague council he'd bragged about running. Darius exhaled, the mug warm in his hands, the weight of weeks lifting. He'd won. Karen crushed, Victor jailed, the airline bleeding cash and credibility. He set the mug down, the kitchen stainless steel glinting, and crossed to the window, the sound's dark expanse stretching wide. Lena was safe, relocated to a new place with a new job, her car's ashes a memory he'd buried with the settlement. The bank had unfrozen his accounts, the fraud flag lifted after Tanya's injunction, his life piecing back together. He'd beaten them at every turn, flight, cops, thugs, courts, warehouse, and now this, a clean slate, a view he'd earned. The TV flickered on behind him, a habit from late-night coding, its volume low as a news anchor droned about the CEO's exit. The airline stock plunging. He almost smiled, the dawn's light warming his face. But then the screen glitched, static crackling loud, the anchor's voice warping into a hiss. Darius turned, mug forgotten, as the picture flickered black, then snapped to grainy footage. Him, on the plane wiping coffee, Karen's smirk edited out, a timestamp from that first fight. Words scrolled red across the bottom. Enemy number 1. His breath stopped, the room tilting as the feed cut to a list, names in stark white, his at the top, bolded, a target painted clear. The broadcast died, static buzzing, the TVs, hum a roar in his skull. He grabbed the remote, jabbing buttons, but it stayed blank. The message burned into his eyes. His phone buzzed, sharp and insistent, and he snatched it from the counter, the screen flashing Jamal's name. "D, you see that?" Jamal's voice cracked through, panicked, keys clacking fast. "Someone hacked the cable feed. Encrypted signal, military grade. I can't trace it yet." Darius's knees buckled, his free hand gripping the couch, the plastic crinkling under his weight. "What's enemy number 1 mean? Who's behind it?" Jamal's breath hitched, static cutting in. "Victor's files mentioned a council, not just airline, bigger. I'm digging, but this is deep, man." The line dropped, silence swallowing the room, the dawn's gold turning cold. He stumbled to the door, pulse racing, and checked. The peephole. Empty hall, the building's hum unbroken. But as he turned, a sharp crack split the air, the window shattering behind him, glass raining across the hardwood. He dove, heart slamming, and crawled to the couch, his mug shattering. On the floor, coffee pooling dark. No gunshot, no bullet, just a package, small and black, thudding onto the rug, smoke hissing from its edges. He grabbed a towel, coughing as the haze thickened, and tore it open, his hands trembling. Inside, a list. Paper, not digital, matching. The TVs, his name first, followed by others. Lena, Jamal, Tanya, even the bald man from the flight. His gut twisted, a cold wave crashing through him. The smoke cleared, the apartment's silence deafening, the sounds waves a faint roar below. He scanned the list, ink smudged but legible. A dozen names, some he knew, some strangers. All tied to his fight, all marked. Victor's words rasped back, "The system's bigger than me." And now it clicked, a beast he'd only scratched. Karen wasn't the head. She was a pawn, her spite a spark for something vast. A syndicate within the airline, maybe beyond, rooted deep in hate he'd barely glimpsed. He'd won the battle, banked the cash, locked her up. But this was their war, and he'd just lit the fuse. He grabbed his phone, dialing Lena, his voice hoarse as it rang. Pick up, pick up." Voicemail. Jamal next. No answer, just static. Tanya's line buzzed dead, the network's hum gone. His chest tightened, the room shrinking. The broken window letting in a chill that sank into his bones. He'd thought Karen was the end, Victor her muscle, but this list, this hack, this smoke, it was a declaration. A hunt starting now. How big was it? Cops? Feds? A shadow boardroom pulling strings? He stood, glass crunching under his sneakers, and grabbed the duffel, shoving the list inside, his mind racing. The coffee's bitter smell mixed with smoke, the dawn's light mocking his calm from minutes ago. He'd beaten her every step, plane, streets, courts, warehouse. Thought he'd buried her war, but this flipped it all. The real enemy wasn't Karen, wasn't Victor. It was a machine, a racist web he'd poked, and now it was awake, its claws reaching for everyone he'd touched. He zipped the duffel, his scarred hand steady despite the dread, and moved to the door. The building's silence a trap waiting to spring. He'd won the fight, sure, but the war had just begun, and he was its first mark. Darius Coleman's relentless battle in this story unveils profound lessons about resilience, systemic bias, and the cost of standing up. First, it shows that courage under fire can shift the tide. Darius faced racism head-on, from a flight attendant's outburst to a shadowy syndicate's wrath, and won battles through grit and smarts, not surrender. His every victory, outsmarting Karen Voss, dodging her thugs, securing a courtroom win, proves that staying calm and strategic can topple even the ugliest foes. Second, it exposes how deep prejudice runs. What started as a seat dispute spiraled into a web of attacks, revealing a system rigged against him, far beyond one woman's spite. It's a brutal reminder that racism isn't just loud slurs, it's quiet traps, like frozen accounts or planted drugs, set by those with power. Third, unity matters. Passengers, his sister Lena, and allies like Jamal and Tanya bolstered his fight, showing that collective support can amplify a lone voice against injustice. Yet, the final twist, marked as enemy number one by a hidden council, teaches that winning one fight doesn't end the war. It's a call to stay vigilant, because dismantling hate takes more than a single triumph. For us, it's a mirror. How far would we push against unfairness? Darius's story isn't just his. It's a spark to question the systems around us and act. So what do you think? Could you face a storm like his and keep swinging? Drop a comment with your take, hit like if his grit fired you up, subscribe for more real talk tales, and share to spread the word. Thanks for riding this roller coaster with us. Here's to strength, truth, and never backing down from what's right.